There is much debate and discussion about whether or not the killer in the Idaho student murders is a serial killer or not. There have been reports that this was an isolated and targeted attack, but there's also been some back and forth on that. I'd like to present a case study for consideration given the very limited information that we know. Keep in mind that a case study does not necessarily represent the majority or even the average. A case study can be wholly unique, but it can also be a useful tool for considering various options. First things first, while there were 4 murders during this event, this doesn't yet classify as serial murder as far as we know. Technically, this event was a mass murder, but there have been serial killers who have engaged in mass murder like Ted Bundy. But that's not who we're going to focus on with our case study today. There are a few arguments against potential serial killer involvement that I'd like to examine. The first being that the killer likely had to have known the layout of this home, with suggestions that it had to have been someone known to the victim. And that brings us to the subject of this case study. Dennis Rader, the self-named BTK killer. BTK was known to scope out residences before committing his crimes. He broke into several homes before his murders, and even made blueprints of some of the victims' houses to help with his meticulous planning. Dennis also worked as an ADT installation manager for a time, giving him access inside potential victims' homes. So, even if this killer in Idaho knew the layout of the home, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was someone known to the victims. Someone could have stalked them, or even potentially burglarized the home while all the roommates were away and learned the home layout that way. Another frequently mentioned argument is in regards to one of the 4 roommates being specifically singled out and targeted as far as severity and location of the injuries. Reverting back to BTK again, his first victims were a family of 4, mass murder. And while their causes of death were very similar, there were distinct and dramatic differences between exactly what happened to them. Without going into details, the daughter, Josephine Otero, went through a very different experience than the rest of her family and appeared to be targeted. Dennis Rader later admitted that he had spotted Josie and her mother outside their home while trolling for victims, and stated that he immediately took favor of the 11-year-old child. He said that he selected her and her family specifically as a part of his, quote, sexual fantasy, though he admitted that he didn't know the father was going to be home when he finally carried out his attack. Another considerable aspect from BTK's investigation is that law enforcement first thought the attack was targeted, even though there was semen found at the crime scene. It wasn't until they failed to find any personal link that they began to think otherwise. Now, we don't know all the specifics of the crime scene inside the house in Moscow. There could be certain aspects, aside from injuries, that might lead investigators to believe this quadruple homicide was targeted. We also don't know for sure exactly where the killer entered and exited the home. We don't know why 4 of the residents were murdered while 2 were spared. This could be another aspect that's led police to believe this crime was targeted. But as more time passes, more people are starting to wonder if this crime truly was targeted or not. Murders are typically easier to solve when the killer is someone known to the victims. Yet here we are 1 month in with seemingly no suspects. So what do you think? Do you think this was targeted and isolated, or do you think that a serial killer selected these victims at random, perhaps based on just a type of person or people? Please leave a comment with your answer, because I'm really interested to hear people's thoughts on this. And please contact law enforcement if you have any information that could help investigators find the individual or individuals responsible for the heinous murders of Xana, Ethan, Madison, and Kaylee.